Hi everyone, GigaBeef here, and today we're going to be going through the best weapons for the middle stages of the wipe with a special mention of a new feature in EFT called NVIDIA Reflex, so stick around and let's get going. After a few days or weeks into EFT, you will probably find yourself looking to upgrade to the next tier of weaponry. What exactly to run at this stage is probably some of the most complicated decision making that you'll have to make in Tarkov, as especially at level 20 itself, you have the greatest amount of choice available to you through the flea, but limited by money, trader level unlocks and hideout progression. Before we continue on with the weapon choices specifically, we can optimize our performance in other ways too, and I'd like to thank NVIDIA who is sponsoring today's video for the release of NVIDIA Reflex in Escape from Tarkov, which is a really cool and genuinely interesting new feature that can reduce the internal latency of your system by up to 38%. There's a link in the description with more information, so do go down and give it a click and it'll help me out as well, but Reflex is all about reducing the time that it takes for an action to process within your PC itself, for example clicking your mouse to fire versus when you actually see this action occur on your monitor. In a very similar way to the ergonomics comparisons that I've done in other videos comparing ADS speed with different attachments, this internal system latency is also measured in milliseconds and can make a big difference both in other competitive titles and also games like EFT where the time to kill is so incredibly low. Having a lower system latency ultimately makes the game more responsive, meaning you are more connected to your mouse movements. From tracking targets, taking precise shots and reacting to split-second decisions, all of these situations benefit from having a lower internal system latency. To give an example, in my previous video regarding the MP153, we observed that a change of 13 ergonomics reduced the ADS speed by approximately 33 milliseconds. When using Reflex, you could receive a latency benefit of 19 milliseconds for a 60Hz monitor and up to a 51 millisecond improvement for a 144Hz monitor, which in this instance would be the same as 7 and 20 extra ergonomics respectively for your weapon. Clearly, this ergonomics comparison is different for each weapon, but this is why Reflex is important. For a game where precise performance of weapons and loadouts matters so much, and we spend so long as players finessing them, you should also care about this on your system. If you're a user of the GeForce GTX 900 series and higher, so that's the 9, 10, 20 and 30 series GPUs, taking advantage of this new feature literally couldn't be any easier. Just go into the game settings menu and turn it on, and your latency will be optimized. Give it a try and see what you think, as everyone's machine is a little different, but there appears to be very little downside in using it. Before I get a ton of questions, I have VSync off in the NVIDIA control panel and I have Reflex enabled in EFT, and that's it, which uncaps my frames completely. Also, turning Reflex on should be fine, usually no need for boost in my experience after using it a little bit. With that said, let's get back to the weapons. We're going to proceed roughly in progression order, although I'll assume flea market access for the most part, as for me that really is the start of the mid-game for players these days at level 20. First up, if you're a fan of shotguns, the MP153 is a great starting point. As one of the few semi-auto shotguns in EFT, you can get the 153 super cheap using the keys trade, coming in at around 25,000 from Skier 1. We won't have all of the cool endgame attachments unlocked yet, but we don't really need them. My go-to so far has been the 8-shell MP133 mag from Jaeger 2, which by the way does fit to the 153, it's earlier in progression and is also better for ergo, and then the new target ring reflex sight. This is an addition this patch, which is really nice when using buckshot rounds, and is also pretty cheap because it only goes on shotguns. I've been going for headshots with express buckshot, as you get one extra pellet which still one taps if any pellet hits the unarmoured head hitbox, and then the Remington tactical muzzle from Skier 2 for a little extra recoil reduction. This is the gun that I used for Spartor Part 1 in Peacekeeper's questlines, and I've been using his weapons a lot this wipe, so it can be helpful for progressing through this particular task. Next up, let's look at the AKM. I was a bit torn about including this here, but what makes it notable is firstly the Prapor level 1-2 Shonka trade, which lets you get a brand new one for 21,000 rubles, and the fact that you have to use them for the Punisher questline, which I consider the ultimate task of the mid-game. PS rounds are still okay in the first month when many people are wearing level 4 armor, but it will become a bit of an issue after around 2 months of the wipe or so once level 5 becomes more accessible and more commonly run by PMCs. In that case, you probably want to move up to BP rounds from the fleet. They are unlocked after Punisher 5, which is a little bit far for some people. Given the relatively high recoil and low fire rate of the AKM, it can make it hard to take down players with decent gear using PS only. With fleet access and some trader levels though, we can make a really efficient AKM. Let's dive into it. With around 52,000 of mods and the base weapon costing 21k, this build ends up at around 73,000 rubles. I think you have to spend this if you want to use full auto at medium distance, as the recoil is less than 85. Otherwise, you may as well use a 7.62 NATO weapon on semi. One cool trick that not many people know about is this handguard combo, because you need the Kibber VDM gas tube to mount the Krebs, which is quite unusual. It does actually say it in the description of the Krebs handguard itself, so these are really good value on the flea market because people just aren't using them. One issue though is that the Kibber VDM is on Peacekeeper 3 and they're very rarely on the flea market, so if you don't have Peacekeeper 3, you can alternatively go and get the CAA from Peacekeeper 2, which is -2 recoil and +7 ergonomics and has a Picatinny rail on it directly, so you don't need to buy any mounts. If you are using the Krebs, you'll have to get the Alt or CASV from Peacekeeper 2 to mount a foregrip, and I usually pick the AFG, which gives you -2% recoil reduction and +6 ergonomics, which you can find cheaply on the fleet or from Peacekeeper 3. Onto muzzles, a really nice combination is the Tactica Tula from Skier 1, which allows you to mount a different set of muzzles on it, and I usually pick the DTK because that's -13% recoil and only -2 ergo from Skier 2, which is decent at this level. We can add a bit more ergonomics using the Saw Grip from Peacekeeper 2, which gives 11 ergonomics, and then from Skier 1 we can grab a Bastion, which gives -1% recoil and +5 ergonomics to allow us to mount optics. Finally, a stock that I think is really undervalued is the UAS stock, which is -38 recoil and +16 ergonomics. This is actually a quest reward from Skier's Informed Means Armed, where you have to place down the Wi-Fi cameras, so it's always on the flea market because people are always going through this quest and selling them. Overall, this version gets you to 73 ergo and 83 recoil before you've added any mags or optics using the Krebs, or 69 ergonomics and 85 recoil with the CAA, which is a similar price. Next up is the RFB, which is basically an improved Vepr Hunter with better magazines, better mounts and better handling, and this can be found on the flea for 45 to 50,000. I'm actually not going to talk too much about this one, as I did a whole video on it very recently and why I think it's better than the Hunter now in the post-durability world. However, I think it deserves to be included in this list as I've used it extensively in the early stages of 12.11. In short, 7.6251 slaps, and M80 in an RFB will absolutely puncture people wearing level 4, as it has a greater than 90% chance to pen on the first shot, which is readily accessible at Peacekeeper 2 before the flea market. Go and watch that video after this one if you want to see more. I always enjoy the early stages of a white because it allows me to revisit one of my favourite guns, which is the MP5 SD, which has been super fun this time around as usual. You can buy this for around 64,000 rubles from Peacekeeper 2 after completing his quest Scrap Metal in his quest line. If you're looking for a weapon with an integrated suppressor, low recoil and little modding requirements, then this might be for you, as cheap 9mm ammo is plentiful, i.e. at least PST rounds, and is actually effective with good aim because of how stable the weapon is to fire. You can build one of these yourself using Peacekeeper 2 parts, as he pretty much sells everything that you need, and this is effectively the Gunsmith Part 3 build, but it's quite a bit more expensive to do it this way, as you can see here, and not worth it until you finish the quest and can buy it all in one go, in my opinion. You're much better off buying it completely from him as a package. In terms of modding, options include adding the ring mount for using a laser or a flashlight, and there are 2 mounts which allow reflex sights or optics. However, the Peacekeeper 1 version is often sold out, which totally sucks, and the other one is Mechanic 3. Using the irons if the mount is sold out honestly is actually okay though, as the MP5 has decent iron sights with plenty of visibility. This is probably the weapon that will fall off the fastest in terms of progression along with the shotguns, so using PST ammo at a minimum and aiming for headshots is the name of the game here. However, with 33 vertical recoil, it's much easier to do so with the SD than many other weapons, and even late game, using AP 6.3, the only thing that you'll have a proper issue with is Altins or equivalent, as it's an 88% chance to pen level 3, which most of the used face shields in the game are, such as on the Exfil, the Fast MT and the TC800, because these are the helmets that let you wear active headsets. You can also craft AP 6.3 in the hideout from 400 rounds of PST and 2 red powders at the moment for approximately 85,000 total, so it's about 425 rubles per shot, which is getting towards the expensive side but is an option as progression moves along. The final weapon that I've been using a lot is the P90. This is around 60,000 on the flea market, or you can get it from a barter at Peacekeeper 3 for 2 military cables, which costs just over 60 at about 62 or 3 at the moment. However, this barter comes with an improved rail mounting system than stock, so it can actually be worth getting instead, given that this rail can only be bought at Mechanic 3. This version does actually have a longer barrel, but I think this is strictly worse because it hurts ergo a bit, but gives no practical recoil benefit because the P90 is already so low at 46. This weapon is probably the highest in terms of trader levels, which is why I've left it until last, but at Peacekeeper 3 you can do the barter trade, you can buy 50 round mags for it, and also purchase the best ammo in the game for the 5.7 caliber SS190, which only costs $3.35 per round, which is about 420 rubles. At 37 pen, it's the same as BT for the 5.45 AKs, but it has 5 more damage, 4% higher fragmentation chance, and that's even before you've taken into account the difference in fire rates, i.e. 900 RPM for the P90 versus 650 RPM for the 5.45 AKs, which is a serious difference. It's also significantly better than AP 6.3 that we mentioned a minute ago, which only has 30 pen and as we saw costs even more to craft. At 37 penetration, SS190 has a 55% chance to pen level 4 armor, which is seriously good with its fire rate and ammo capacity. One potential issue is the P90's starting irons in my opinion are really bad. I hate using them, so I began running a laser only build on factory first of all, which worked super well at close range. But when using the P90 barter, this isn't an issue as I said, because the mount allows you to grab a reflex and attach it straight away. The alternative is the FN upper, which gives an easy mount for sights, but that's a Mechanic 4 so it's a little bit out of reach at this point. Magazines are also pretty expensive for this gun at around $100, which is roughly 12,500 rubles each, but given they are 50 rounders, I think it's probably worth it. This does, however, compound with the absolutely horrendous in-raid mag repacking reload time of plus 75% on this, which necessitates bringing 3 mags as a bare minimum, i.e. 1 in the gun and 2 in the rig, because once you're out, you'll be leaving your PMC reloading in a bush while you go off to make a cup of tea. Personally, I'm using the P90 at the moment with a delta point red dot, except for when running long-range raids. I think this hits the sweet spot of cost effectiveness, minimal modding, good rounds against most players that I face, and early high capacity magazines. Eventually, I will move on to weapons that use higher tier ammo when level 5 armor becomes more prevalent, but for now it's working an absolute treat. Before we go, a final reminder to check out the link in the description to find out more about the NVIDIA RTX cards and their new Reflex technology, and if you give it a look, it'll help me out too in making sure I can continue to bring high quality sponsorships that are relevant for you to the channel. I am genuinely a huge backer of NVIDIA. My entire current rig is built around their NVENC encoding technology and my 3070 GPU, which has been a total game changer for me over the past 6 months, so thanks again to them for partnering with me on this video. If you want to help support the channel, as always consider dropping a like and a sub. I also stream on Twitch and co-host a weekly Tarkov podcast called ScavTalk, for which there's a link in the description. To catch me when I'm live, make sure to check out my Twitter, which is where I keep my schedule up to date. And with all that said, I'll see you next time, and as always, have fun in your raids.